This is Carl Labonville. Carl has been making high-performance custom snowboards in Golden, BC under the Exegi brand since the 90s. Exegi specializes in carving boards, freeride boards, and split boards. They're known for their high performance and unmatched durability. Carl has agreed to make 10 boards for carversconnection.com. He suggested that we go with his latest design for the intermediate and advanced carver, the DoubleWide. It's a 167 with 138 centimeters of effective edge, 10 millimeters of taper. It comes in 2 waist widths and 3 stiffness options. These are available now for purchase on carversconnection.com with delivery expected in early December of this year. I asked for these boards as part of my crusade to bring carving back into the mainstream of snowboarding. 10 is not a lot, but it puts a few more high-performance carving boards on the mountain, and it's going to put some smiles on 10 riders' faces and a whole lot of clean pencil lines in the groom this season. This endeavor puts Exegi snowboards on more people's radar, promoting another small builder who isn't yet well known outside of the core carving community of North America. I would love to see Carl quit his day job to build snowboards full-time. Every board he builds and test rides helps advance design and so benefits all carvers in the long term. If you're watching this video, it's probably because you took the time to add your name to the new product announcement list at carversconnection.com. Thank you for doing that. I truly appreciate your support. This is an opportunity to join the crusade, to support another small builder and Carvers Connection, and to own a board that will rip the kind of turns that no production board can even come close to matching. The original DoubleWide was a board I asked Carl to make for me in 2019. This was his first foray into the universe of wide soft boot carving boards. A link to my original unedited review and comparison to the Donic Sabre is in the video description. Since that first DoubleWide, Carl has refined the shape, the flex pattern, and the turn characteristics to suit a wider range of riders. It's somewhat less demanding than the original, softer with more side cut depth, incorporating the latest technology in side cut shape with harmonized flex and new materials. He's found a balance between nimble and powerful, forgiving and responsive. The new DoubleWide is a great representation of the latest approach to free carving specific boards. It's designed ground up for the needs of the free carver, rather than a detuned, softer race board, which had been the trend until recently. For example, the free carver wants to finish their turn facing across the hill or even slightly up the hill to control their speed, whereas the racer needs to point down the fall line as much as possible. The free carver wants to maximize their time on the edge through a turn. The racer wants to minimize it. The free carver wants to go slower, controlling speed on each turn by carving a closed C shape. The racer wants the opposite. The result is a board that's easier to carve, a board that allows the rider to adjust their trajectory at any point in the turn. It's forgiving of imperfect rider inputs. It handles chop, groom, slush, and variable conditions better. It's easier on the body and easier to go from a carve into a skidded turn and then back into a carve, so the rider can comfortably scrub speed when necessary. What I'm going to show you next is a short clip of me riding the original DoubleWide back in 2020 on a storm day in Revelstoke. This is actually the first video I ever uploaded to YouTube. After that, we'll look at some excerpts from an interview I did recently with the man himself, Carl Labonville of Exegi Snowboards.
Good evening. Welcome to the boardroom. Today I'm with Carl Labonville from Exegi Snowboards. Carl, welcome to the boardroom.
Thanks, James.
Good to see you again.
Treat you here, man.
Right on, right on.
Yeah. No, thanks.
So Carl and I met actually at Montucky, the first event in 2019, and tested some Exegi boards, and immediately asked him if the same question I was asking every builder at that time: how wide? How wide can you build it? Right?
Yeah,
And
basically said, how wide you want it.
exactly, we agreed on 30 centimeters at the waist, and I think maybe 3 or 4 weeks later, I had my first Exegi DoubleWide.
Yeah, the DoubleWide. I love that.
Yeah. So, I think you've built a lot of wide boards since then, and a lot of different kind of boards. That was a long time ago. Why don't you start by telling us what's new in Exegi since then?
I mean, the biggest thing is I've been building a lot of split boards. Been building boards for riders who are aiming at making the free ride world tour. One guy who has, and they've been riding at the Golden event, and so high performance, high speed free ride boards. The trend there is wider, very much like carving, like the stuff you wanted, right?
I was surprised when you told me that the other day, because I anticipated free ride boards. If you're not carving on corduroy, the boot overhang is not such a big deal.
Yeah, but they really don't want to boot out. If they boot out, it's kind of catastrophic.
Right, yeah. I guess
right,
it's high consequence terrain.
It's a high consequence terrain thing, and they're dropping things. They're coming out with big speed, so they've got to get pretty high edge angles to turn and get across terrain to the next feature they want to hit. So the boards are loaded up, and if they're not wide enough for their feet, some of these guys and girls are bigger than normal people, and they need wider boards. But the trend in general has been wider, but not any wider than they need to be.
So what are they running for, like an average size 9 or 10 boot?
27.4s,
Okay.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
28 for guys in size 29s, kind of thing.
Okay.
Again, they run into the same problem as everyone else. If it makes it too wide, it's too hard to hold on, and the board gets more cumbersome a little bit. But it's got to be wide enough so you don't boot out.
Right, and they're probably running much lower angles than carvers.
Yeah, they are. Even compared to soft boot carvers, they
yeah.
tend to be riding lower angles. They tend to run a little bit of back foot.
Back foot duck, yeah.
A little bit, but
sure.
Not as much as everyone thinks. It's certainly not minus 15, minus 12, minus 9, minus 6 on the back foot.
So we got the new, not this board in particular, but we got some new DoubleWides coming, new technology, designed more for the soft boot carving end of the spectrum. So not dissimilar from the free ride boards, but accented more to the carvers, right? So maybe the nose is a little narrower, there's maybe a little less taper, the overall width might be a little bit greater. What else are you adding to this new DoubleWide to make it soft boot carving specific?
Yeah, mostly the stuff you just said. The other differences are the boards are shorter because you're not dealing with powder and flotation, right? Overall length. Edge contacts longer because you're looking for more stability carving, and you don't get the stability by being in the snow, right? So you need the board's edge contact lengths to be longer, and it's more of a gestalt and more of a golden mean thing where you're trying to get boards that are happy at a certain speed doing certain radius turns, not to be confused with side cut radius, but certain radius turns on the kind of terrain that people are liking carving on, like nice blues, easier blacks that are well groomed, and you need to be able to close your turns off.
Sure.
Right? And so it's trying to get a board that takes the stability you need to deal with the speeds that you're going to get on those kinds of terrain, but have it come around fast enough to finish and close off your turn.
To control your speed.
Without
starving.
Without starving excessively. Right? The dirty little secret is that everyone starves sometime. right? Like
Okay.
We all say, yeah, I'm going to nail pencil turns the whole way down, and that's what we were aiming for. But every once in a while, you misjudge, and you need to be able to deal with, I'm going a little too fast, and I'm heading for the side of the run. I'm running out of real estate. It's the real world. There's, people coming out of the woods. There's things that you got to turn around. You want to be able to alter the shape of the turn to tighten it up, usually, without launching yourself into oblivion, right? If it hooks.
Yeah.
So you need the ability to go from a carved turn to a slarve turn and then back. And this is a combination of a bunch of things you see on these boards, right? Like camber, side cut, and probably most importantly is matching the flex pattern to those things so that it's going to work at a roughly 45-degree edge angulation to get the turn shape you want, which is tight enough to come around and enough to keep that speed. Yeah. Right?
So I noticed the new double wides are down from the original 14 meters to a more civilized 12 meters.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a number that all the carving carving boards for soft boot people are trending towards.
Yeah.
10 is, you get some boards, especially longer, softer, directional shape, the Japanese thing, right? Mm-hmm. They tend to be down under 9.
Yeah, sure.
But they're not powerful enough to deal with the speed.
Right.
And the 14s, 16s, 15s in the hard boot world, that's too much. The speeds required are too much to deal with soft boots. Mm-hmm. And it's scary. And,
I agree that it's scary. But my soft boots are really quite firm, and I actually handle a lot of speeds in some big radius turns.
Yeah.
But most people, I think, come at this from the other side. They're like, 12 meters, that's such a crazy side cut radius. But in my experience, a 12-meter proper carving board can make tighter turns than a 9 or 10-meter production board because you're able to get so much more angulation out of that board. You can turn it tighter because it can handle the edge pressure required for that level of angulation. It's really not a problem.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. That's for sure a big part of it. Like, there's a couple things that are happening. You need to get that edge angle, so you need the width. Mm-hmm. Like, that's kind of how we ended up with boards that are 29-ish wide, like in general, for people with relatively normal boot sizes. You need some room to get the edge angle to make those side cut radiuses turn nice, tight enough, and you need enough speed to balance on that edge. Like, if you don't have the centripetal force, if you don't have something to push against, you tend to fall over.
And torsional rigidity. Right?
Yeah. So the big reason, the big problem with these long, like I'm thinking of the Stranded Cheater, which is a lovely board at low speed. Really fun. But as soon as you get over a certain speed, the board is just not stiff and strong enough for a person of my girth to deal with the loads that are coming at it, and the board starts to slip sideways. And this happens because the board unwinds torsionally. Mm-hmm. Okay, there's not enough torsional stiffness to maintain the counterflex in the board as it's going through the turn. Whereas the C4s, the Contras, the Exegi boards, the DoubleWide, the carving freeride boards that I've been making, which are just a little skinnier. There's enough torsional stiffness that side cut will make that turn. It doesn't roll away and the side cut doesn't come off it. Mm-hmm. It's And I mean, I think we can take another run at this too. Like, we can talk a bit about this. There's been a bunch of videos online. Is that good? There's been a bunch of videos online lately, the last little while, talking about the relationship between side cut and turn radius. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. And so side cut, you know, they tend to talk about either radius or depth, which are kind of the same thing.
For a given length, one defines the other.
One defines the other either way, but there's two more variables that they don't talk about very often. One is edge angle, or the angulation of the board.
Right.
Because if it was perfectly perpendicular to the surface, the tip and tail would touch. Right? But that never happens.
Right.
Like, we never get to 90 or 0. We never get there, and the board slips and deforms enough to change that radius from the picture that it's drawn on, if you look flat on it, to what it conforms to the surface of the world you're riding over. Mm-hmm. So the stiffer the board is torsionally, the more likely it is to follow that curve that is the side cut for whatever edge angle it is. The board has to have a flex pattern which allows it to deflect and fill into that space. But if you don't have enough torsional stiffness, as soon as the pressure comes onto the board that's generated from turning, the board wants to twist off. And effectively what that does is erase the side cut. Mm-hmm. So if you're going from a 7-meter side cut radius and you roll it up on edge and the board loads up and the board twists, it's now maybe 9, maybe 11, maybe 11 up in the shovel and 9 under your foot. But it's going to roll away. And then usually what happens is the board slips sideways and it grabs again. And then it slips sideways, and that's the initiation of chatter. Yeah. Fundamentally. Mm-hmm. Right? Or a bump. Right? But if, assuming everything's smooth and you just roll the board on the edge, load it up, it's not torsionally stiff enough for your weight at that speed, at that radius, the board will start to drift as the side cut gives up, and then hook and drift and hook, and that's where you're getting chatter. Mm-hmm. And if you look back at tracks in the snow, you'll see that chatter line, and you can almost imagine the board going straighter, it's slipping forward, and then suddenly it tries to grab again, and it will make that washy, hooky pattern.
So would you say then, for your standard production, quote-unquote, carving all-mountain board, sure. With, 9 to 10 meter radius is pretty standard. Would you say that for a given run, the new DoubleWide with a 12 meter side cut will carve tighter turns? Like if we're, real carve, closed turn shape.
Yeah.
How would you compare those?
I'd say what's going to happen is, in general, higher performance carving boards, right? These guys, the new DoubleWide, are going to turn tighter turns at higher speeds than the production 9 meter radius.
They're hard to compare because you're maxed out in speed on those production boards.
Yeah. If you want to make it carve, you got to knock the speeds down.
Yeah. And
you know how it works. It's easier and harder at the same time. You got to if you don't knock the speed down enough, the board's going to do this funny wiggle where it's trying to go too much and then give up and slip, and you got to try to balance on top of an exercise ball to get it to stay in that comfortable zone. If you drop the speed down, yeah, that will work. But then you're turning a million little tight turns, and again, you don't have the ability to project into your next turn with enough energy to roll and get the early turn initiation high up in the turn because you're going too slow. And if you're not perfect, everyone can make it work one way or the other. It's just that do you want to do a bunch of little turns, or do you want to do at low speeds, or do a little bit higher speed turn that's tighter even, where you can aim where you want to go and come out with enough speed to initiate the next.
So the new versions of the DoubleWide, I understand, are also more forgiving, less demanding, and sort of more nimble, less of sort of a locked-in feel than that original model was.
Yeah, I mean, the original model was, our first shot in the dark. And, I want to carve pencil line turns. I've got really stiff, soft boots, and I don't care if it doesn't work not on groomed, right?
Yeah.
Back in the, that's what we were talking about, and maybe we went a little too far, right? Like,
oh, I love that board at the time.
Yeah, but it's, it's demanding. It requires, a certain level of commitment to get a 14-meter board to turn around in that space, right?
Yeah, it's a big side cut for such a short, effective edge.
Yeah, it's kind of on the corner of the golden mean, that ratio of side cut to turn radius, the stiffness pattern, and flex pattern.
It was only 5 years ago, but I feel like that was a point in my life where I really wanted to just do everything bigger and faster. And now I'm kind of leveling off a little bit. I think I've pushed that end a little bit. Now I still like that, but only on the best days.
Yeah, and you know what? Having it a little easier doesn't mean you can't get the performance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe not at the very top end if you're trying to race. You're trying to get seconds, right? Or hundredths of seconds. That's not what we're talking about. Right. We want to be able to close our turns off, carving. So, the big problem is that we go too fast. So we got to have a way to slow down, and the way to slow down, and we want to slow down, is by heading uphill a little bit, right? Like finish the turn off, close it. And in order to do that, sometimes you got to be able to feather off the pressure on the tail and then hook it up again. And we need to match the flex pattern and the torsional release of the board to allow you to do that with subtle movements of your feet. That's kind of what you're trying to get at. And I've been getting better and better at it. The boards are getting pretty sweet. They're like, the big turnaround for me was a little 122 edge contact free ride board I built for a person. I took it out for a spin with my hard boots, and I could carve it almost as good as this.
What is this, a 190?
That's a 194. So that's a 154 edge contact board, and that was a 122, and I was blown away. And it's not that it has more power and more edge grip. It doesn't. It just doesn't need it, because you can settle the edge in as you're in it, and when you hit bumps, I was blown away. And it's just been getting better and better. I mean, and there's a nimbleness in there that you can change turn shape mid-turn to make things a little bit more fun.
So I understand part of what you're doing with this new wave is you're kind of shaving off a little bit of that hookiness at the ends of the effective edge and the nose and the tail.
Again, we're all standing on the shoulders of giants here.
Yeah.
This is something.
This is a trend. It's become known in the carving community as sort of like a contra-style side cut.
Sure.
But Coiler, Bruce did not invent it. And you can see, if you lay these over top of each other.
Yeah, you can really see here.
You can see very clearly the hookiness in the nose here versus the smoothness. Almost as though you took a regular hooky nose and you just sort of planed it away to make it smoother in that transition. And it's the same in the tail. You take out that hookiness entirely.
Yeah, but if you do this too, you'll also notice that this is critical. I don't know if the camera's going to pick this up, but this hook is this far away. Like, I don't know if you want to bring that in there, but this hook assuming that your comparison is still there. If we look at the tip and tail here, the hooky part happens that far away.
It starts way back here.
It starts, and that's where the board's starting to come off the snow.
Right.
So this part of the side cut in here is actually quite straight. Right? So until the board is rolled over, it doesn't really start, and it's got to get rolled over pretty far to start getting hooky or grabby. Right? And these guys, it's a little more subtle. Right? But that contra shape, you know, it's back here, the turn-in point. And they've softened this curve. And we're all doing it. Yeah. Like, it's in everything. It's in everything from board across boards to powder boards. You know, a Furberg is a version of that from years ago, right?
That's an extreme example.
An extreme example
of really taking that out. I mean, they run with 18-meter side cuts, and it's almost flat for
around
centimeters in the nose and the tail. Yeah. But those don't carve. I think it's too much. It's not appropriate for a carving board.
It's all a balance of where you want to go, how fast you want to make the board capable of going, how much you're going to demand good snow conditions, right? Versus we're going to live with a bit of push piles, we're going to live with a bit of slush in the spring, we're going to live with a bit of...
Well, the reality is not every day is a perfect day, and but so your board has to handle a lot of different conditions, variable conditions.
Yeah, that's part of the goal. And I mean, the double wide is probably going to be somewhere between the JCJ and the coiler as far as dealing, maybe a little better than both for dealing with not so good snow. Not as pinner high performance on perfect snow.
Yeah, both of these boards were designed to be dedicated carvers.
Yeah.
And I understand the double wide still has a little more free ride influence than...
Yeah, that'd be a safe way of putting it, or a good way to put it. It's coming, instead of coming from carving to make it so that it'll work with soft boots, it's coming from free ride and soft boots to carving. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If that makes sense. I mean, you should be able to ride it in a little bit uglier snow, but it's still a shorter nose and tail. It's, you know, you're not going to go backwards into anything soft. You're not doing it. It's a carving board.
So it's what, 138 effective edge?
138 effective edge.
About 10 millimeters of taper?
Yeah, so 10 millimeters of taper, which puts you into the, there's more taper than a twin, right? But less taper than most carving boards, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, taper's fundamental job is to launch you kind of down the hill at the end of your turn, as opposed to across the hill. And since we're trying to kind of even go up the hill in free carving, in carving for fun, as opposed to carving to shave hundreds, I wanted to take some of the taper out of that to make the board finish turns a little easier, as opposed to a little more aggressively, if that's a way to put it. So if you're finishing the turn and you don't want to get exploded out of it, it's a little easier if you wait a second longer, a half a second, a moment longer to come across the fall line more. And maybe you want to subtly release some tail pressure before the flex pattern matched to that side cut will allow for a relatively easy transition if you let it, but if you stand on it, it'll snap out of that turn too, and it'll propel you into, if you want to do an unweighted, lifted through the air turn, just don't release that back quarter of the board.
So it's a delicate balance, right? I mean, you want a board that's going to be sensitive to rider inputs, but also forgiving, which means forgiving of a rider's errors in body position or weight shifting or timing or anything like that.
Yeah.
And to do that, it needs to be slightly less sensitive to rider input. But in there's sort of like a magic compromise for each rider. It might also be different.
Yeah, and I mean, you gotta give people room to move on the spectrum of stiffness and the stiffness package, the stiffness envelope, right? Like the longitudinal flex to torsional flex ratio. And so, we're going to do this board in a couple different flexes, right? 3, stiff, medium, soft, for lack of better words, which should cover that. It should allow people to get, depending on your weight, depending on your aggressiveness, depending on how, and that package doesn't just describe the lengthwise stiffness. That describes the torsional stiffness and where the torsional stiffness is blended in compared to the binding insert pack, right? And where the stance centering is and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think width is something that's pretty rider specific as well. And for so long, all of us were forced to ride boards that are too narrow unless you were gifted with tiny feet. And now there's more options available, right? And I think getting to that point, I mean, my experience, my first soft boot Donic was 31 wide at the waist, because I had ridden, just the week before I ordered it, I had ridden Ryan Napton's board, which was a 30 centimeter wide board, and I'm like, well, I can still boot this out, let me go wider. But 31 was too wide for me. 30 is really it depends on the board and the side cut and a bunch of factors, but roughly,
and the
day for sure, right? And the location and how firm it is and how soft it is. But 31 I found was just too wide, and it became at a certain point too cumbersome. And if I wasn't carving it, it didn't handle well in off-piste conditions and stuff like that. It was too far to get it over on edge. So you're offering this board in two widths, 2 waist widths, right? 28.8 and 29.4.
Yeah, and that's wide, but it should be usable by most people who are not tiny. I mean, width is funny, right? We all have been making boards wider and wider until they kind of got maybe too wide. And too wide is probably when it's too cumbersome and it's hard on your feet if the world isn't perfect.
Well, there's that, and I mean, inevitably there's going to be a trade-off with that extra width.
Yeah.
So if you're carving only and you're Ryan Napton, who's getting as close to 90-degree angulation as anybody,
you're in Breckenridge where they have beautiful grooming, right? And nice snow.
Then the extra width is worth the sacrifice. But if you want to take that board all mountain and do more things with it, I'm just saying there's a trade-off, and there's no magic number at which point I don't boot out anymore. Like, I can always boot out.
Yeah, because if it gets a little soft, the board sinks into the snow. You boot out. Like it's if the board's counterflex like mad and the snow is soft, it's sinking in, and in order to not boot out, it gets so wide.
But there's so many factors in determining like what is the perfect width for you. And first of all, it's a perfect width for a specific board. It's not the perfect width for across all boards.
Absolutely not, yeah.
But I mean, okay, so the size of your feet, right?
Yep.
The angles of your stance, and eventually the width of your stance, because the wider you go, the further away you get from that narrow waist, and you get a little extra
absolutely. You can save yourself a bit sometimes by going a bit wider.
Do you wear risers? Do you ride a low profile binding? But as much as any of that, it's what kind of snow are you riding?
For sure.
I mean, if you're in Eastern hardpack, well, a Hera overhang or just having your toes just flush with the edge of the board, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
But if you're riding kind of soft corduroy in Grand Targhee, Wyoming, You want a significant amount of underhang. You want
Yeah,
some
yeah,
board
that's the
past your
move.
toe. Yeah, I mean, I used to ride there. I would make 4-inch trenches with my mitten. The corduroy was so soft.
Yeah. And those days can be challenging in a weird way, right? Because,
Dude.
yeah, no, there's all kinds of variation there. And like you say, there's probably no perfect number. So, you know, we're going to do a 29.4 and a 28.8 at the waist. So that should get bigger folks, right? Options.
I think those are decent options, and both of those are, I'm pretty sure, wider than any production board for waist width.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I mean,
think
there might be an outlier somewhere out there. Who knows? But and if your feet are smaller, you know, you're kind of well served.
Exactly.
You know, like you got options already. Unfortunately, this, you know, there's been a bit of a knock on Bigfoot people in the carving world. You just haven't had a lot of options, and big feet is over 27.
Well, 27 I think is pretty close to average.
No, but what I'm saying is that 27 feet, soft boot carving, you're kind of running out of room. There's just no room available.
For sure.
Not in anything stiff.
Yeah.
You can maybe get a party platter or something super wide that's soft, made out of a biax, but, you know, there's no torsional stiffness, and it's not a high performance anything, right? It's not made for that. It's not going to do it, carving. So, you know, those people have been underserved.
So tell me about this monstrosity. My goodness, what do you call it?
I don't even have a name for that. That's just
That's
a big you know, I called it at MCC back in the day. My first day, I called it the new girlfriend. You know, all I wanted to do was ride that one.
How did your wife feel about that?
Yeah, well, exactly. But, you know, that's always the same with the last girlfriend, right?
But you can see the carbon wrap here in the sidewall, and you can see the overlap.
Yeah.
Kind of arcing across.
Yeah,
the
and
top
I mean,
shape.
this is, you know, back in the day. This is 2019, winter 2019. I mean,
this was new that year.
That was new that year. That was new that week.
That week
at
MCC.
At MCC.
Okay.
So yeah.
By the way, we should just briefly plug Montucky Clearcut is happening again this year.
Yes, it's back on.
Amazing event. There are still tickets available, limited to 90 riders. MontuckyClearcut.com if you want to get in and get more information.
Best part by far, no passing.
No passing rule.
No passing, which sounds like the lamest thing ever until you think about it.
Then you don't have to check. You don't have to worry.
It's absolutely awesome.
Trust it.
Like,
so if
really
for people who don't know, it's basically 100 or so carvers rent out an entire mountain for a week and bring grooming machines from out of state. And
it's terrific. It's a terrific event.
Yeah.
They have awesome food. It's a super cool little hill. The patrollers are there giving you high fives for carving, not giving you shit.
Right.
And, you know, like it's rad. And in 2019 it snowed and snowed and snowed. So
oh yeah, that was the powder event.
That was the powder week, yeah.
Nice.
So yeah, but I mean, this thing was, you know, the start of reverse camber, trying to figure out where, how much, and all that kind of stuff. And this is a little too much.
Too much early rise.
Too much early rise.
Yeah,
too much decamber. It starts kind of here, and it should be a bit less and a little farther up. But it's still totally fun.
You got to try. You got to test that and figure it out.
You can't get it right the first time. If you do, you're mostly just lucky. You know, that's almost the worst thing that can happen.
Right, because you don't learn anything.
You don't know where the boundaries are, right? So you really want to check things out. And so what else is new with you this year, man?
Oh, I got big plans. I started a little bit late here. But
haven't we all?
Yeah. So last year we launched the website carversconnection.com, and this year we're launching our own in-house brand with our own products. We've got two different style of risers. One is what we call the butterfly wing riser, which is kind of a mix of, I don't want to get too deep into this stuff today,
but rad.
This is sort of a mix of JCJ's butterfly riser with the Kessler idea of the two-piece for adjustability.
Oh, so you can offset for your stance angle.
Yeah, and for the width, because it's super crucial when you're riding.
Yeah, no kidding.
when you're riding risers, not crucial, but for the highest performance, you want the edge of the riser really, really close to the edge of your board.
So you can get the loads going into the edge.
Right where you want them, right? So the only way we could do that was by adding another set of holes. So it's not the cleanest. This was the first one here. Some of these are a bit cleaner. And then we've got a canted riser, which is the first of its type, at least the first of its type since the.
I got those.
Burton. Yeah, but this is a cant. It's not really a riser.
Yeah.
Right. So this is not the final design, but these are in production now. So yeah, so you get a little bit of rise in the front, about 3 degrees across the thing, and we're going to have this fully adjustable, so you can set it to any angle, goofy or regular. It'll provide lift in the back foot or
toe lift in the front.
Toe lift in the front.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, we actually started this one with a full circle, but it was just too cumbersome and too heavy.
Yeah.
It's going to affect, because it's so wide, it's going to affect the performance of your board the opposite way of what you want, right? If you look at the shape of these versus the shape of that, right?
Yeah.
So we dropped that idea and found another way to make it universal. We've also got boot stiffeners and straps coming.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll be retailing on the website outerwear from Skyline.
Oh, cool.
You know Freddie? The old school Canadian racer, Freddie and Sarah? Yeah, that's his company.
No way.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, I think he's got partners in it. It's not just his.
Yeah,
I think he's one of the head designers.
Nice.
They're actually 3D printing jackets now. Can you believe it?
3D printing's pretty rad.
Yeah, and not just the fabric, but the whole arm piece that just gets stitched on.
No way.
And it's incredible because, first of all, he can fine tune the performance of every section of the jacket, right?
Yeah.
But moreover, there's no waste, right? He was making fabric in one location, shipping it to another location, having the product made, throwing away tons of excess, then shipping it to warehouses, and then shipping all over the world. Now, as long as you have the printer that meets these specs, you can print it anywhere. So you can make it in multiple locations. There's no waste, there's less shipping, and higher performance.
Well, you should be able to at least... Yeah, you should be able to do rad stuff with the fabrics. Like if you can print fabrics.
I'm looking forward to testing one.
Nice. Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, anyway, thanks for showing up. Thanks for telling us about what the Exegis.
Yeah, well, it's been a passion of mine for a long time, man. We've got to trying to make boards that are more fun and last longer. And, the soft boot carving guys need something too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like they need, especially like I said, if your feet are small, you're well served anyway. But there's not a whole lot of stuff out there. But the last few years have been rad.
Totally.
The last few years have been rad.
Yeah. People are finally realizing there's a market for this stuff. And I mean, it's been my mission to basically push the industry in the direction I want to see it go.
Yeah.
Which is more carving specific gear, which is wider boards, higher performance boards. And so thanks for being a part of that.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to do it, that's for sure. And I mean, from my point of view too, the realization that people have that you can use carved turns in more places, more of the time, is something that's only been possible with better boots, better bindings, and better boards, right? And we're getting there. We're getting there. Like, we're getting to the point where you don't have to just, like, either carve on perfect groomers and then, slide and straight line to the next perfect groomer if you're on a carving setup that's super dedicated, or you have a free ride board that doesn't ever carve. Now we have stuff that works, and it's rad. The last few years have been really, really fun.
It's been fun for me.
It's been fun, right?
I'm glad to transition from, I used to have to use hard boots to get the kind of turns I want.
Yeah.
And it was unsatisfying in a way. And I'm really happy to be riding high quality, high performance soft carving.
This is cool. Like it's really cool that everything in the industry that's happening is saying to everyone, carving is a legit thing. The Japanese, Asian carving, soul, surf carving thing, the trend. Every company's got a carving board now. Like they're still generally too skinny and too slow, But
for some of us.
Yeah, but they're coming. They're coming.
Yeah. I think there's movement in the right direction.
There's movement in the right direction. Yeah. Absolutely, right? But side cuts without too many bumps in them.
Yeah,
is a big deal.
You don't like magnet traction?
Yeah, not really.
Yeah.
No, it does something. You don't need to know how to file anything.
Oh, yeah, that's helpful.
Right? If you don't want to file anything, you can put the brakes on, no matter what.
Yeah.
So, kind of.
Thanks again, Carl.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Lovely. What did we run there? About 52 minutes.
Here we have a layup of a typical Exegi snowboard. On the bottom, at Durasurf P-Tex, Durasurf base material. It's a high graphite racing base. Above that, you've got steel edges. They're standard steel edges used by pretty much every snowboard manufacturer in the world. And then the difference thing is that little yellow string you've got going back and forth is a piece of Kevlar. And that ties the edges together so that it's a little damper and a little bit, significantly more resistant to getting ripped out of the board when you hit rocks and things like that. Again, to help with that and to help with damping, there's a black strip of, they call it VDS rubber in the industry, but it's basically just a very thin piece of rubber. And it helps bond things that are quite stiff together with a layer that can shear a little bit. So the rubber shears a little bit, and the carbon above and the steel below can move a little bit so that they don't tend to crack apart from each other. It allows the glue to adhere better to the stiff thing and have some slippage in between. It's pretty microscopic, but it does help. Above that, there's layer of plus or minus 45 degree carbon fiber. So that's this white stitched stuff here. And then above that in this photo is unidirectional carbon fiber. Now that's been replaced with a unidirectional S-glass. So that's a ballistic, high-strength fiberglass. We use that because it's a little damper and a little less stiff than the carbon. And the biggest problem with running uni-carbon, lengthwise, is that you have to make the board so thin, tip and tail, to make it bend enough that you can have problems with durability. The glass is stronger, only marginally heavier, and only when compared to its stiffness. So its stiffness to weight ratio is not as good, but its strength to weight ratio is excellent. And then on the top, you've got above that, you've got horizontally laminated core, inserts, and then another layer of unidirectional reinforcement. In this picture, it's carbon, but in the boards, what we're going to be making here, they're all made of S-glass. I've been using that now for 5 years, and it's just better. And then the carbon fiber wraps up the sidewall and over the top like I joke it's a big burrito, basically. And that means there's no seam, there's no laminations on the side of the board over the edge. You have the edge glued to a box of carbon fiber, basically.
No sidewall.
No sidewall. It is a sidewall. It's the vertical part of the board is the sidewall, but it's not a separate glued together sidewall. The sidewall is the side and the top and the bottom. Fibers go from the bottom, make the corner at the side and make the corner onto the top, and they're overlapped in the middle over where the binding goes. So that helps with getting crunched for high loads from, especially back in the day with more hard boot boards and plate bindings that tended to have a bit of a problem digging into boards and breaking them. But it helps now with just durability, and it makes the seam in the middle a big lap joint. It's really hard to have. They don't come apart. It's just
sounds very durable and high performance.
It's durable and high performance. The fibers are pointed in the direction the major load paths go on the board, and they make the corner, so you're not relying on a glue seam. You're not going from super strong stuff on the top to a plastic vertical component on the side to super strong stuff at the bottom glued together. It's a piece of carbon fiber bent around, so it ties it all together.
Great. And you've been building them this way for a long time?
Yeah, I started building them back in the early 90s, 91, 92. And with this basic construction, things have tweaked.
Sure.
As they would have been. How many years is that? But we're talking a lot of years. But basically the idea of this monocoque wrap thing, you know, is something that I've been sticking with, and it's really good. I mean, like anything in the free ride half of the world, carving, it's not nearly as big a deal. People are generally way more careful. But in, you know, Golden, a lot of people hit a lot of rocks. And
kicking horse
is rocky and intense terrain. And, you know, where I was making boards before in Whistler, it was the same thing. A lot of granite sticking out everywhere. People smash stuff all the time. And, yeah, you can smash the board, but the edges don't come out, and it doesn't, the delamination doesn't propagate along the glue line. It stops at the next fiber going around. Gives you a chance to repair the thing.
Okay, that was good. That was way longer than what I was anticipating, but maybe we'll try that again at the end.
Yeah, or you can cut the ums and ahs out.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, something like that. Okay, so you lie down right here. Hey, lie down. Lie down. Come on. Lie down all the way. No, I don't want your paws. Lie down. Lie down.
Well, you know how it is. I tend to geek out, so
I know. We'll figure
it in if you want.
Yeah, it's okay. I get paid by the watch hour on YouTube, so the more you talk, the more people watch, the better. Just all right, lie down.
Is it by the watch hour?
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. The longer I keep people watching, is the more. Anyway, I don't make any money from YouTube.
No. But I mean, that's the metric.
That's the metric. Yeah.
Gotcha.
All right, so we're gonna start again.
Yeah.
So, don't forget to look at the camera once in a while. Yeah, welcome to the board. No, I got to start that again too. Okay.